The most important control room for the global food supply doesn't monitor grain prices or track shipping containers. It's a network of industrial compressors buried along a pipeline in Texas, pushing a colorless, odorless gas at 800 pounds per square inch. This isn't about heating homes. It's about the single most critical industrial input that modern agriculture cannot function without, and its supply chain is measured not in months, but in weeks. We think of food in terms of fields, weather, and harvests. But the 20th century's agricultural revolution was, in essence, a fossil fuel revolution. It swapped sunlight for hydrocarbons. The pivot point wasn't oil for tractors. It was natural gas for fertilizer. Today, over half the world's population is fed by crops grown with synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, and nearly all of that fertilizer is made from natural gas. The link is chemical, absolute, and terrifyingly immediate. If the gas flow stutters, the fertilizer plants shut down. If the plants shut down, the fertilizer isn't made. If the fertilizer isn't made, the next planting season fails. The entire system operates on a razor-thin, just-in-time inventory that can be measured in shipping containers. The fragility isn't in the farm. It's in the chemical plant. Take the city of Beaumont, Texas. Here, along a stretch of the Neches River, a cluster of facilities represents one of the densest concentrations of nitrogen fertilizer production in the Western Hemisphere. They run 24/7, consuming staggering volumes of natural gas, transforming it into anhydrous ammonia, the foundational molecule for nearly all synthetic nitrogen. The process is simple in theory. Combine nitrogen from the air with hydrogen stripped from natural gas, under immense heat and pressure. In practice, it's a voracious, continuous beast. A single large plant can consume enough gas daily to heat 1 million homes. These facilities are the throttle between the energy system and the food system. They have no backup fuel. They cannot economically store more than a few weeks of product. Their output is a continuous flow that matches the seasonal heartbeat of global agriculture. Now, here's the catch that most people miss. The food price crisis doesn't wait for the actual harvest to fail. It begins the moment the fertilizer flow stops. The market is a forward-looking machine. Traders in Chicago and Rotterdam aren't betting on today's bread. They're pricing next season's wheat, corn, and soybeans. When a fertilizer plant in Trinidad goes offline due to a gas shortage, or when a European producer cuts output because gas prices have tripled, the calculus changes instantly. The future supply of food is discounted. The price spike isn't a slow burn from field to supermarket. It's an electric surge through the financial nervous system that governs all commodities. The physical shortage of fertilizer hits farms months later. The price shock hits your grocery bill within weeks. This creates a perverse and invisible export. When a country with cheap, abundant natural gas like the United States or Russia produces fertilizer, it's not just selling chemicals, it is exporting liquefied fossil fuel sunshine. It's packaging the energy density of methane into a form that can grow crops anywhere, effectively outsourcing the agricultural land and climate of its own gas fields to other nations. The largest exporter of this packaged energy isn't an oil giant, it's Russia, followed by China and the Middle East. Their leverage isn't just over heating bills, it's over the very nutrients that sustain populations. A nation can be energy independent, but remain utterly dependent on foreign gas in the form of fertilizer to feed itself. The timeline of collapse is brutally short. Global fertilizer inventories typically cover just 2 to 3 months of global demand. The production cycle is continuous, but the application cycle is seasonal. Miss the narrow window to resupply before a planting season, and the shortage is locked in for an entire year. There is no catching up. This isn't like a factory pausing car production. You cannot simply run the fertilizer plant overtime later. The crops must be planted on nature's schedule, not industry's. So when the gas supply hiccups in January, The fertilizer missing in March means less corn in August, which means less animal feed in October, which means more expensive meat next winter. The lag is long, but the trigger is instantaneous. We experienced a dry run of this cascade in 2021 and 2022. First, a hurricane idled fertilizer plants along the US Gulf Coast. Then, soaring natural gas prices in Europe forced over 70% of the continent's ammonia production to simply shut down. Finally, the war in Ukraine cut off access to a major portion of the world's exported fertilizer. The result wasn't a gradual creep, it was a vertical spike. Urea, a common nitrogen fertilizer, saw prices quadruple in less than 18 months. This translated directly to the price of every staple crop that depends on it. The wheat market went parabolic, but the crucial detail is this. The worst of the food price inflation hit global markets before the war in Ukraine significantly disrupted that year's grain harvests from the Black Sea. The fertilizer shock was the primary detonator. One material now decides the price of half the calories on the planet. This reveals the core paradox of our modern abundance. We have built a food system of incredible efficiency and scale, but it rests on a foundation of constant, massive, and inflexible fossil fuel consumption. The Green Revolution traded one form of fragility, the unpredictability of weather and soil, for another, the geopolitical and logistical fragility of a global hydrocarbon supply chain. The system is optimized for cost and yield, not for resilience. There is no slack. A farmer in Iowa and a farmer in Brazil are now competing for the same molecules of nitrogen, derived from the same pools of natural gas, shipped from many of the same ports. They are connected not by trade agreements, but by a pipeline and a chemical reaction. The real vulnerability isn't the gas well or the fertilizer ship. It's the concentration. The industrial process to make ammonia, the Haber-Bosch process, is over a century old. It is a masterpiece of chemical engineering. It is also incredibly energy-intensive and centralized. The economies of scale are so vast that production clusters in a few dozen mega-clusters worldwide, near cheap gas or major ports. This creates breathtaking choke points. The Louisiana Gulf Coast, the Sichuan Basin in China, the Volga region in Russia. A disruption in any one of these places doesn't just affect a regional market, it tightens the entire global balance. The system has no distributed backup. You cannot make synthetic nitrogen fertilizer in a shed. The infrastructure itself is the bottleneck. So, when we ask why food prices can skyrocket even when harvests are good, this is the structural answer. The financial market for food is no longer pricing sunlight and rain, it is pricing natural gas 6 months forward. The trader in Chicago is effectively betting on the stability of gas flows in the Permian Basin, the maintenance schedule of a compressor station in Qatar, and the political decisions in Moscow. The grocery bill is a delayed receipt for a chemical process that happened half a world away, or failed is just the final delivery mechanism. This changes how we see stability. A stable food supply is no longer guaranteed by fertile land and good weather alone. It is guaranteed by the uninterrupted operation of a global network of high-pressure chemical plants, fed by a continuous stream of methane. That network is brittle. It cannot pivot quickly. It has no plan B, and its product has an expiration date tied to the planting calendars of both hemispheres. The system works perfectly until the gas stops. Then the countdown begins in weeks, not seasons. Most people assume a food shortage starts with empty fields. Where do you think the real shortage begins? Drop your answer below. I'll break down the next hidden choke point in our supply chains. The hidden infrastructure is always there. I'll show you how to read it.